Slow down fast fashion. The origins of where Eurocentric trends come from and their impact on us today. For every minute of this speech I give, a worker in an overseas factory spends 1 hour just to earn 10 cents. And why? It's because the continuation of these fast fashion trends motivate and incentivize these workers to continue their jobs. As a avid consumer and active participant in the fast fashion industry, and avid researcher, I am qualified to educate you today. I will inform you of what fast fashion is, how fast fashion impacts our globe, and what companies are responsible and use the fast fashion industry. What is fast fashion? The article, 7 Fast Fashion Companies Responsible for Environmental Pollution, quotes, "Fast fashion refers to the business model within the fashion industry that relies on cheap and speedy production of low-quality clothing to meet the latest and newest trends." Essentially, this definition boils down to cheap clothing made quickly. And typically, this clothing is consumed by American and European consumers. You may or may not have heard this definition or this term before, but just to be sure, raise your hand if you've ever bought from a company like Shein, Temu, or Amazon clothing. Perfect, a lot of you guys. Raise your hand if you've ever researched where that clothing was manufactured. Wow, great. This statistic may seem very simple, but it's actually very dangerous. By not knowing where our clothing comes from, we are partakers into this potentially harmful fast fashion industry. Generally speaking, these companies use child labor overseas. However, it is not all companies. You can have fast fashion without child labor, but typically you can't have child labor without fast fashion. As American consumers, we should know where our clothing comes from. Page 451 of an article titled Waste Couture, Environmental Impact of the Clothing Industry, shows a picture. Beneath it, it states, "The owner of a textile factory in Dhaka threatens a child laborer who works for 10 hours a day just to earn $1 And this. This is the image right here. As you can see, this is the worker of the textile company, and that's the child laborer. However, the harsh reality of cheap prices is child labor, and being on the topic of child labor and sweatshops can be very politicized. Some economists argue that sweatshops promote economic growth, while human rights activists would argue that it is unethical and no matter the positive consequences. Without looking at the source of production and the way it impacts developing countries, fast fashion can still have a lasting effect. This is the environmental and economic impact. The carbon footprint of these fast fashion companies have painted a picture of American and European priorities. An article titled Cleaning Up Fast Fashion quotes, "Americans throw away more than 68 pounds of clothing per person per year." And that is just an average number. It's not a personal number. It's not meant to be this person does that, but it's an average of however many Americans there are versus how much waste of clothing there is a year. Some of these textiles contain hazardous chemicals such as hydrogen chloride, a gas that can cause respiratory disease. And this is essentially dangerous for the workers that are creating these clothes because they are exposed to it every single day in mass amounts. The article titled Ugly Beautiful, Counting the Cost of Global Fashion Industry, quotes, "A pair of jeans uses 3/4 of a pound of pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. However, the U.S. does make an effort to choose sustainability. According to Claudio, 30% of rags, 30% of this waste turns into industrial rags, 25 to 20% is used for furniture such as upholstery and insulation. 45% of clothing is donated to other developing nations for aid. Claudio also states, Walmart began selling in organic cotton women's shirts. Today, the company is the world's largest buyer of organic cotton. The environment is not only the only impact that this industry has on the world. An article titled "The Tax Loophole That Helped Shein Keep Prices So Low," the author Andrew Chow states, a trade rule known as de minimis that allows them to ship packages without paying duty for certain taxes as long as the shipments are under the value of $800. The origin of this trade rule was for people that were going overseas and bringing back expensive souvenirs to not get taxed on those souvenirs. However, many of these overseas countries or companies have taken advantage of that and use their shipments to be under that rule so that they can still ship out a mass amounts of packages without getting taxed on them. And while consumers see what is a long shipment process, low staffing or overselling, what tens of millions of U.S. citizens see is the loopholes that they have to jump through. However, economic and environmental impacts go hand in hand. Illustrated in the article, Transnational Fashion Sustainability Between and Across the Gulf and the UK states, the increase in demand for polyester fiber in particular has coincided with the advent and rise in commercial prominence, commonly described as fast fashion. Many people see the path of fast fashion as an economic win. Chow quotes, he's quoting a business executive named Steve Story, "This is the new model, this is the future." While the topic of companies benefiting from this industry, what companies are classified as fast fashion? The article stated before, 7 fast fashion companies responsible for environmental pollution has a list of 7. However, they are not to be told in any specific order. Number 1 comes in at Zara. They have more than 450 million items produced every day. 2 is H&M for their copyright infringement of other high fashion sellers. 3 is Forever 21 for using synthetic fibers and child labor. And each have made claims to be more sustainable, but have shown no evidence to back it up. Skipping number 4, we get to Shein. Shein is a completely online store with some small in-person pop-ups that mass produce these very, very cheap and thin quality clothing. A lot of people are familiar with it in America because it's tailored to these Eurocentric beliefs and wants. At number 4, we had a company called Uniqlo, and number 6, a company called Mango, and 7th was ASOS. Not in any order, supposedly. These are just a few companies. It does not mean that they are bad, per se. Touching back to the economic progress, we get the question, with incentive for profit, how far is too far? The beauty of choice allows us to choose where we buy from, especially in America and Europe. But would restricting these companies have any impact on us today? Now that I have informed you of what fast fashion is and how fast fashion impacts the world, and some companies that are fast fashion, I hope you will rethink your future clothing purchases. This is the Works Cited. If you have time in the future, I suggest you visit a website called Sweatshop Simulator. There you can become an actual sweatshop worker. Thank you for listening to my speech.